Every time you cut tatami, you should look at the piece you have severed and the standing stock that's left, analyze the difference between the two. You could do that with a bottle too. It presents limited information because, as we've seen, it can rip, it can act in ways that are kind of unrealistic. However, if you do pay attention to the bottles, each time you cut, you can still learn a great deal about your cut through how the bottle reacts to the sword, where the pieces go, and what the pieces look like. I've talked a lot already about it sort of spraying and exploding. That's an always available clear sign of a good or a bad cut, is the quantity of water that comes out of the bottle at the end. I've had one really good cut so far where you could see that I'd cut horizontal and the water was all the way up to that line. The best cut possible is one where the bottom half of your severed bottle doesn't move at all. The water doesn't spray at all, it falls straight down, and the top of the bottle moves the minimum distance possible. I'll do some bottle forensics on these cuts, and then hopefully create some errors in my cutting so that we can see how it affects the bottle and affects the aftermath of the cut. So here I saw the water again fall straight down for the most part. The cap fell to one side, the bottom fell to the other side. That's a pretty good sign that I'm not drastically imparting a lot of energy on the bottle. So here's my bottom half, here's my top half, but I can see that from the top to the bottom of this bottle, there is a slight angle change. It's probably a 1 degree change at the last ½ inch of the cut. But that tells me that, again, that cut wasn't perfect, and that would explain why there was still some water spray and why the pieces did not remain still. It only takes a very small amount of edge deviation, and yes, I can totally see it here. If I keep this knife flat on the plane, it starts to have a gap here, which means that it turned. You see a very clear change in angles on both sides of the bottle. There's nothing straight about this at all. There's weird things happening in terms of the label is partially severed here because it was ripping and cutting and tearing. So while this is a very common outcome that somebody would count as a good cut, I would consider this a full failure, in my opinion. This is not a good cut by any means. There we go. Here we had a large explosion. Both the cap and the bottom flew a long ways over here. Now, what do we see on the bottom? We see buckling and crunching, because as I came down, I pressed into it, and the weight and the pressure of my sword pressing down on the bottle collapsed the bottom. There's twists and rotations through the top that tell me it was not good edge alignment. The cap is just nonsense. And this is usually from people who are focused on the downward aspect of the cut. They're driving both hands down, and they're thinking about pushing their sword down, and then they're turning their blade because of all this. And instead of relaxing and letting their sword kind of flow through the natural arc based on the shoulder joint, they're pushing with their arms and their shoulders down and swinging with their biceps to try to cleave almost like an axe or something like that. Rotating the edge from inline to being vertical down is common. Likewise, rotating it out so that you're starting at a good angle and then leaving parallel to the ground. This one is most commonly caused by people being afraid of hitting the stand. So the moment that I notice a student is afraid of hitting the stand, what I will typically do is I will take their bottle away. I generally am not afraid of doing this. Here's my $2,000 Albion Viceroy, and I'll say, look, it's not gonna kill your sword. I have never dented, bent, done anything wrong to a sword with any of that demonstration. And likewise, my students have buried swords up to 6 to 8 inches deep into 4x4s, and they have not damaged a sword with this. You have to keep in mind that there is a potential for, say, pinching and twisting that could put a set into your blade. But for the most part, these are high carbon spring steel blades that are made to be able to impact harder things than a soft wood that you're using in a stand. So you don't have to worry about hitting the stand. Go ahead and hit it. I'm gonna try to replicate that issue where I'm afraid of hitting the stand and turn it. Many times this does succeed at cutting the bottle, but again, we look at the bottle and we see that the outcome is not clean. So here you can see a totally bonkers bottle. It almost looks like it goes in horizontally and turns vertical. That's not exactly the case. What generally happens is that as it impacts and it starts to turn, the bottle also begins to move and turn, and it kind of just cuts the bottle as it moves. But anytime you see a rotation, instead of a straight line where you've just cut the bottle, consider it a failure. If your water sprays, consider it a failure. Once you can get clean bottle cuts every single time, maybe the bottoms don't all stay on the stand, but you notice the water is always falling down, put in some steps, put in more bottles, put in more stands, right? Many of my students and instructors like to stack 2 or maybe 3 bottles on top of each other and see if they can cut all 3 in a row, all clean without knocking the bottom one off early, things like that. But if at any point while you're making your bottle cutting fun and exciting, you lose sight of the bigger picture, you start counting cuts that are out of alignment, scalloping cuts as successes, you may want to take a step back and go back to your basics and make sure that you're able to flawlessly cut this bottle, have that water fall straight down.